Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about chest development and some of the tools that we can use to bring up a pectoral weakness on the bench press. And I'm not saying these are the only tools. I'm not saying there aren't other things that can work, because there obviously are. These are just some of the tools in our toolbox. But today what I want to really focus on are tools that allow us to get a deeper stretch on the chest. And the reason for that is that both for stretch reflex purposes and range of motion. So usually the bench press itself, when done correctly, is actually quite a good chest exercise. And most of the best experts agree. And again, I'll name for you two people who are on YouTube even who have made it very, very clear that the evidence supports this, and that would be Jeff Nippard and Dr. Mike Israetel. And I don't think anyone's going to say that they are guys who lack education. So again, a lot of people say, well, it's just a bunch of nerds, because bodybuilders will argue against that. Well, they both have really big chests and big bench presses too. Okay, so you can't use that argument. But they'll both tell you the bench press itself is one of the better chest exercises. Now, the people who fail to develop big pecs from benching are usually guys who don't do full range of motion. They bounce off their chest. They don't get their scapula retracted. They don't do high enough reps, because that is something that there's data supporting, that lower rep benching does seem to shift the ratio slightly away from the chest towards other muscles. That is true. But if you start doing higher reps, and I mean 8 or more, anything over 8. So if we start doing 10s, things like that, we're good. Where we actually pause, we take a relatively decently wide grip on the bar. It doesn't have to be real wide. But basically to where you're not close gripping. Then yeah, the bench press itself is a good chest developer. However, like with anything else, this doesn't mean that our pecs can't become a weak link in our bench, because they can. Even though realistically they're the primary mover, at least in that style of bench, they can become a weak link. For other people, it's triceps, so on and so forth. But big pecs, if you know how to bench correctly, usually bring your bench up. And if you have weak pecs, for many people, it can become a weak link. Some other benchers, not so much. Again, depends on benching style, depends on your personal anatomy. But the bench itself works the pecs. The problem we have is that the range of motion is somewhat limited on a bench press, particularly when we bench correctly with an arch and everything, which actually is the correct way to bench. So getting a deeper range of motion, though, oftentimes gives us more strength potential, right? Because range of motion matters. And it's something I've discussed quite a bit in the past, and it's not guaranteed to give you more growth. So when we say more range of motion usually has more potential for growth, it doesn't mean automatically, right? It doesn't mean just because you use a longer range of motion you're going to grow more. It doesn't mean that a slightly shorter range of motion that it's impossible to maximize growth or get very, very close. But range of motion itself is a useful tool. And if you can take a muscle through a longer range of motion, you are creating a better environment for muscle growth. I just hate it when people say stuff like, oh, it's an absolute requirement for growth. Well, no, it's not true. You can get pretty good growth with partials. It's just not ideal. And if we're struggling with our pecs, if our pecs are small, our pecs are weak, and it's limiting our bench press, and we want a bigger bench, then we need to be looking at these tools and need to step back and say, okay, for me personally, maybe I do need some more range of motion. And where's that range of motion at? It's at the bottom. All right? We're getting that deeper stretch at the bottom where the pecs are at a mechanical disadvantage, and there's the most mechanical tension on the pectoral. And if you get good at all these presses from the bottom that take you deeper than the barbell does, it will hopefully make it a lot easier to press the weight off of your chest. And if you look at these different tools that we have, you see a buffalo bar. I've got a cambered bench bar, also called a McDonald bar. There's a little bit of history on the guy. In fact, there's so much history there that you can't look the bar up without getting his history instead of actually how to use the bar. It's unfortunate. There'll be 37 articles explaining his whole history instead of just telling you about the bar. It's actually quite unfortunate. I wish there was more people who discussed the bar itself. And I wish it was more common. It was really, really popular at one time, but a lot of people got hurt doing it because it does allow for more extreme range of motion. But you can limit that with things like bench blocks, right? You can limit that with bench blocks if you need to. You can limit that by only doing really high reps with it, with lighter weight. Okay. Which again, are we trying to build muscle in our chest? We can do our heavy work to get stronger. We can do our maxes to maximize strength. We're trying to build the pecs. It's useful, but it's a really useful tool because it gives us the deepest stretch possible. And in some cases, the stretch is so deep that a lot of people, like even myself included at the time of this video, we cannot even touch our chest with the bar. We're still not able to reach the chest at our full stretch. Okay, but it gives you an enormous stretch at the bottom. Enormous stretch at the bottom. And again, the guy who invented it was pound for pound one of the best bench pressers in history, the guy who owned the patent on it, right? He made it for a purpose because he realized he needed it. And the reason the guy made it was because he just couldn't get dumbbells heavy enough. He realized, well, my gym has limited dumbbells. I really need to be able to put more weight on here, and I can't get dumbbells big enough to continue to get the benefit of dumbbells. So he invented this bar. But the idea of it itself is similar to dumbbells. Dumbbells let us get a deeper stretch out of the bottom. Also, dumbbells are a valuable tool for reasons I've discussed in the past for better overall development because we can change our grip as we approach failure. We change our bar path on them as we approach failure because we're not locked into a plane with both hands together. It sometimes lets us work a little bit more of the muscle to fatigue than we otherwise would because we start working our stronger points as the weaker muscles kind of peter out a little bit, right? And even parts of the muscle. So again, it allows us to get a lot of development. Now, the more common bar is the one you saw me using at the beginning, of a buffalo bar. Depending upon individual brands, some companies call theirs a bison bar. Chris Stephan calls his the Duffalo bar. But a buffalo bar is a general term, or a bow bar. I like buffalo more. The idea is the same there. It's got a curve in it. It allows us to get a deeper range of motion. And that range of motion is more gradual as we go to a closer grip. And as you go to a wider grip, it gets more and more pronounced. And for some people, you might find even with a wider grip, touching the bar to your chest with that one is difficult. But you will be able to almost always touch your chest with it, which means we can do pause work with it. Right? We can do pause work with it easier. Whereas with dumbbells, we're more concerned with getting a stretch reflex. And we could argue even with that McDonald bar, if you can't quite touch, you're going to want to do it for stretch reflex anyways. But these things give us different tools to work with, right, for bringing up our chest if it's a weak link because of the additional range of motion and the additional stretch at the bottom. Right, and that's really, again, what makes dumbbells so magical. And in fact, I mean, if we only had to pick, we could argue that the dumbbells themselves might be the better of the choice. But the specialty bars do let us get practice with using a barbell while still getting a deeper stretch also. So again, if we're talking about bench carryover, but we could make the argument that, if pecs are lagging too much, just following up your bench pressing with just dumbbells alone, if you have access to dumbbells, will help correct that quite a bit. All right, it's an easy solution. When we start adding these other bars to the mix, we're taking that solution to the next level, right? Because we're now attacking it from multiple angles. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.